Hibino Kafka, a 32-year-old man with wasted purpose, is still stuck on his childhood dreams of becoming a monster slayer, even though he's way past the age limit. The geezer gives it a shot regardless, but sometimes things don't go as planned. A massive kaiju is probably hungry for a snack, so it decides to take a tour of Yokohama City, destroying everything and everywhere. Kaiju literally means strange beast, so anytime I mention it, just try to picture something like a dinosaur or something of that sort. Anyway, the Godzilla ripoff is busy strolling around, feeling like George of the city, but the city's defense force plays the hero and takes down the proud beast. Kafka Hibino's cleanup crew is summoned to deal with the messy aftermath. The kaiju is so big that it'll take them at least a week to decimate its parts and clean up the area. Just as they're getting started, Kafka gets assigned to the intestine segment. He tries to vanish like the last airbender but gets caught by his boss's strong grip and taken to the section. Later that evening, Kafka is practically marinating in the stench while he lies on his bed at home. He turns on the TV and finds out that the townspeople are basically worshipping Mina Ashiro, the young hotshot captain of the Defense Force's 3rd Division, who played the major role in taking down the giant lizard. In a brief moment, he is reminded of the promises he and Mina made as kids, to wipe out all the titans. I mean kaiju in the world, but he feels somewhat bitter about how their paths separated. I mean bro just literally cleaned kaiju's feces. The next day, a pretty-faced dude, Leno Ichikawa, joins their cleanup crew. He claims he's just joining part-time and his real dream is to end up in the defense force. Hearing this, Kafka's colleagues let him in on the fact that Kafka once shared that dream, but life kicked him in the balls, so he's stuck cleaning up messes. Leno just declares like Sasuke that he's not going to be a lost cause like Kafka. They resume cleaning the kaiju mess, and Kafka puts the newbie through, helping him get a handle on his responsibilities. However, they were both put in the shitty section. After work, Leno thanks Kafka for his help, drops a bombshell, and gives him an AOT pep talk about seeing his dreams through. Kafka then starts to take a liking to him. As Leno is about to leave, a kaiju that literally looks like Spider Monkey from Ben 10 makes a surprise appearance and tries to attack him. Kafka immediately channels his inner Midoriya and manages to pull Leno out of its attack range. He borrows some lines from the same Sasageo anime and tells Leno to run away and keep moving forward even if it kills him. He then tries to take on the monster himself, while reminiscing about his childhood dreams with Mina. As expected, the kaiju hands him his butt on a platter, breaking his bones like Sun Jin Woo before his awakening. It looks like game over, but Leno returns with reinforcements. Mina and the 3rd unit show up, taking out the kaiju like it's no big deal. At Minami General Hospital, Kafka wakes up and sees himself heavily bandaged. He meets Leno by his side, who tells him he'd have been toast if Kafka hadn't saved him. He insists that Kafka should give the defense force another shot, and Kafka gets a surge of motivation while thinking about Mina. They had made a bet in the past that they'd end up stronger than the other, and Kafka still hasn't given up. Just then, a small dragonfly kaiju suddenly appears in front of him and dives straight into his mouth. Next thing, he transforms into a kaiju in human form, freaking both himself and Leno out. Meanwhile, in her room, Mina's taking a bath and reminiscing about Kafka's failed promise to fight kaiju by her side. She suddenly receives a call about a kaiju appearance at the hospital and prepares to head out to eliminate it. Amidst the chaos, Kafka tries to convince Leno that he's still the same Kafka he knows, just with a monstrous makeover. He tries to flash a reassuring smile at an old man who stands frozen at the door, but ends up looking somewhat like Jinbei in One Piece, causing the poor old dude to faint. Kafka tries to steady himself by resting his hands on the wall, but it just shatters at his touch, leaving both him and Leno gawking at his new Hulk-like strength. The noise attracts attention, and the hospital staff decide to come and see what's happening. Getting to the destroyed room, they see something looking like a demon from Devil May Cry, waving at them. They totally freak out and try to call the defense force, so Kafka and Leno decide to make a break for it through the window, only for Kafka to accidentally shred it along with half the wall in the process. As they run, Kafka undergoes a bizarre transformation, sprouting tentacles like a squid and a mouth beside his mouth like the one who humbled the honored one. The mouth suddenly extends and snacks on a crow in a disgusting manner, and he then reverts to his regular kaiju form. While they run, Kafka realizes he needs to pee but can't control it and ends up leaking from his nipples. Mortified, he wishes he could just die, lamenting that he'll never get a girlfriend again like this. Kafka suddenly stops and tells Leno he senses another monster similar to the one they had encountered the previous day nearby. Suddenly, noises are heard from a distance about the appearance of a kaiju. Leno then sees this as an opportunity and tells him they have to escape quickly since the defense force is likely going to be more occupied with the kaiju causing real wreckage. A mother is stuck under the pile of a destroyed building, and her 5-year-old daughter is crying beside her when the kaiju suddenly appears and tries to feast on them. In an instant, Kafka swoops in with a punch which sends it flying. He tells Leno to take the child and her mother to the hospital while he takes care of things. The kaiju, having regained its stamina, charges at Kafka at full speed, but this time he goes full Saitama and delivers a punch which causes it to explode in a bloody shower. He reassures the child that Leno will take her to safety and promises to leave so she won't be scared. As he turns to leave, the child stops him to thank him, and this makes him blush uncontrollably. Determined to still try for the defense force, Kafka shares his resolve with Leno, and as he does, he starts transforming back into his human form. Shortly after, the defense force gets to the venue and is shocked to see the kaiju already in pieces. She later confronts the little girl to find out what happened, and the girl tells her about the good kaiju which had saved them. This completely shocks Mari. They search every nook and cranny of the city but can't find the mysterious kaiju. 3 months later, Kafka is out practicing how to control his kaiju and his kaiju form effectively when he suddenly receives news from Leno that they have both passed the first stage of the Defense Force examination. They get as excited as Luffy whenever a banquet is announced. Fast forward 10 days and they find themselves at the Nishi Tokyo testing site, Defense Force's Tachikawa base, for round 2 of the exams. Kafka's day starts off with a bang when a young girl suddenly calls him an old geezer and yells at him rudely to move his car to a different parking spot. She claims the spot he parked on has her lucky number and she wants to park there. Kafka, understandably confused, watches in amazement as she effortlessly lifts his van with one arm and tosses it aside like a trash bin. She smiles and introduces herself as Kikoru Shinomiya. She tells them she's also an examinee and then eyes Kafka suspiciously. She walks up to the 32-year-old geezer and tells him he smells like a kaiju. Looks like Kafka's got more to worry about than just passing the exam. Kikoru sniffs the air like a dog and wonders why Kafka reeks of kaiju, and Leno jumps in with the save, explaining that it's probably because they work at a kaiju disposal company. I believe he deserves a Premier League Playmaker of the Season for that level of assist. Kafka, not one to be outdone, casually flips the van back into place, leaving Kikoru to wonder if he's also someone special like herself. Kafka proudly introduces himself, insisting that Kikoru remembers his name. Kikoru, while heading away, smiles to herself, thinking that she might actually have some fun messing with the geezer. As she struts away, Leno scolds Kafka for showing off his powers, and Kafka insists he only transformed parts she couldn't see, like a ninja with a kaiju twist. Leno outlines the second stage of the exam, which is divided into the fitness test and the aptitude test. The aptitude test changes every year, so their best bet is to rack up points on the fitness test so they can at least meet the pass mark. During the marathon test, old age kicks in and the geezer barely manages to place 219th out of the 225 contestants. I'm seriously wondering who the last 6 people are. Kikoru, who had played 5th, takes her time teasing him, telling him she'll definitely remember his name. Leno commends him for not using his powers, and he says it'd be unfair to the people who are actually working hard. Soshiro Hoshina, a member of the 3rd Division, hands Mina the list of examinees, and she is surprised to see Kafka's name among the contestants. The top 3 from the fitness exam are Haruichi Izumo, Iharu Furuhashi, and Aoi Kaguragi. Leno points out to Kafka that they are basically elite ninjas, but the creme de la creme is Kikoru. Even Haruichi, Iharu, and Aoi keep tabs on her. The examinees gear up for the aptitude test, and Leno notes that for the past 2 years, the test has been about Kaiju's disposal, which explains why he joined their cleanup crew. This at least boosts Kafka's confidence, making him think he can make up for his pathetic performance at the fitness test, since he happens to be an expert at Kaiju disposal. At the exam's entrance, Soshiro Hoshina dramatically introduces himself as the vice captain of the 3rd Division and drops the bombshell that the test this year will entail hunting down Kaiju. Kafka then realizes he's cooked for real. Soshiro takes them inside to change into some Defense Force suits loaded with Kaiju muscle fibers to boost their strength. Putting on the suits, they all feel a surging amount of energy flowing through them, and Soshiro explains that the suit is going to power them up based on their own abilities. He explains that even trained professionals only manage to pull about 20% of the suit's power, and that if they manage to make it to 10%, they're really strong. Suiting up, Leno manages to channel a combat power of 8%, Haruichi hits 18%, Aoi 15%, and Iharu 14%. Then, like an overpowered protagonist, Kikoru unleashes a staggering 46%, completely shocking Soshiro and all the other examiners. She has just broken the record. Our MC, on the other hand, pulls up a solid 0%. He also set a record for being the first to achieve that feat. Soshiro kicks off the exam by revealing they've strategically placed 36 Kaiju inside the exam facility. Each examinee gets a high-tech, auto-tracking drone to monitor their every move, so if things get too dicey, they will be able to activate the suit's shield, but that will mean instant disqualification. He adds that Mina Ashiro, the captain, has decided to observe the match too. This makes Kafka activate a light-skinned level of composure. With his subpar combat skills, Kafka decides he and Leno should play support. Spotting a Kaiju, Kafka uses his disposal expertise to toss a stun grenade, exploiting its sensitive hearing. He then tells the others to aim for its stomach, which turns out well. Kikoru, on the other hand, swings around, easily obliterating the Kaiju like Mikasa Ackerman. Things seem to be going well for Kafka too, until a Kaiju sneakily ambushes him from behind, knocking him against the wall and fracturing his leg bones. The Kaiju slowly approaches him, and just as it looks like Soshiro might have to activate Kafka's shield, Kikoru swoops in like Tanjiro and slays it. Soshiro contacts Kafka, telling him he's got multiple fractures and internal injuries, suggesting he bow out gracefully. But Kafka, channeling his inner Rock Lee, stubbornly stands up, determined to keep going. Leno tells Kafka he'll be his wingman, and Kafka asks him to carry him like a sack of potatoes on his shoulders. They chase after Kikoru to provide backup. However, trying to keep up with Kikoru is like Goku chasing after Frieza. She goes all out Super Saiyan on the monsters, annihilating them all. The exam ends in Kafka's annoyance because he wasn't able to do anything due to Kikoru's OP showdown. While she turns around with the intent of trolling Kafka again, a mysterious Kaiju suddenly appears from nowhere and pierces her through the chest. Meanwhile, Leno and Kafka are sprawled out. They marvel at Kikoru's skills, despite her shitty attitude, while they retreat slowly. But to their horror, the supposedly defeated monsters start regenerating, like they've got Wolverine's healing factor. Kikoru gets up to fight, ignoring her injuries, but the Kaiju knocks her down easily Sakura in a real battle. Observing the chaos, Soshiro notes that the strange Kaiju is an unusual one that only Mina or himself has the power to eliminate. Soshiro immediately announces that all examinees evacuate the arena, while he and Mina try to head there to stop the disaster. Kikoru, as persistent as a demon slayer, still struggles to get up, and this is the time when she has that protagonist flashback about how she has always tried her best to gain approval from her father, who is always as unimpressed as Sasuke. This time around, the mysterious Kaiju has already used its reincarnation jutsu on all the dead ones. Like that's not weird enough. It talks to Kikoru and tells her she's the first person to withstand its attack. It then leaves, so she's left with facing one of the monsters she had earlier killed, except this time, it's at least 10 times stronger. She gives it her best shot, but fails woefully, with the monster shattering her bones like Midoriya against a tough opponent. The monsters try to finish her off, and Soshiro and Mina lament because they may not be able to get there in time to save her. In a flash, Kafka appears and commends her for doing a great job so far. As the monster charges, he does a dramatic Hulk transformation and blows it to pieces with just one punch. Kikoru is too tired to comprehend what just happened, so she takes the easy way and passes out. Luckily, there were no drones around to project the fight. Shortly after Kafka transforms back into human form and takes Kikoru to the evacuation center, Mina and Soshiro arrive at the scene. Seeing the splatter, they are reminded of a similar incident in the city 3 months back and wonder if there could be a connection between them. At the hospital where Kafka's wounds are being treated, Leno tells him that Kikoru is also in stable condition, and he thanks Leno for proving to be a homie during the test. Mina suddenly shows up and thanks them for seeing through Kikoru's safety. Kafka, caught off guard by this, freezes like a deer in headlights as she immediately leaves. He thinks to himself that it's probably best to wait until he's officially a troop member before having a proper chat with her. Meanwhile, the same mysterious kaiju is watching the news on a phone in a public bathroom and is dumbfounded to find out his kaiju minions didn't manage to kill anyone. Someone calls him from outside and he immediately morphs into a human and heads out. Plot twist: he's part of Kafka's kaiju cleanup crew. Kafka and Leno are visible nervous wrecks as they await their test results. Shortly, their letters arrive for them. As Kafka is about to open his, he daydreams about fighting kaiju alongside Mina like Deku and All Might. Fast forward to the day of their inauguration, Mina appoints Kikoru and the rest as official Defense Force members. Kikoru, standing tall like a proud Saiyan, feels a pang of guilt over Kafka not passing, especially since he saved her, and now she's the one being showered with praise. She snaps back to reality as Kafka bursts into the room, apologizing for being late. Despite his poor performance, Soshiro had taken an interest in him and his hilarious antics, so he passed him. Mina explains she had Kafka skip the ceremony because he'd been appointed as a mere cadet. Regardless, everybody seems pleased to find out that the old man had passed too, making them a total of 28. Mina then announces the rising threat of dangerous kaiju and calls on her new team to give it their all, even if it means risking their lives. Kafka gets carried away and calls the superior officer by her name while promising to fight well beside her. That conveniently earns him a punishment of 100 push-ups, which naturally shouldn't be much of a big deal, but for someone as close to the grave as him, I think it'll be a huge problem. While watching the old man push his way up to his early grave, Soshiro reflects, thinking that Kafka might be connected to the other day's incident, based on a hunch, and he's determined to uncover the truth like a shonen protagonist on a quest. Later that day, Kikoru meets up with Kafka and demands a thorough explanation. She's shocked to find out that he ate a kaiju and became one himself, but she eventually agrees to keep it secret. 2 months have zipped by since Kafka and the gang joined the Defense Force. Leno's been training hard and now boasts an impressive release force of 18%. Soshiro watches from the sidelines, nodding like Master Roshi at Goku's progress. Iharu, training alongside Leno, can't help but be competitive, grinning like Bakugo when he sees his own released force is 20%. The other squad members talk about their slight improvements too, but then Kikoru swoops in to boast about her whopping 55% released force. Despite all this, Kafka is thrilled that his force has finally climbed from 0 to a whole 1%. While he rejoices, Soshiro bluntly tells him he'd be canned in under 3 months with stats that low. He, however, seems proud of their improvement in general. That evening, the men's cohort hits the baths. Iharu, trying to set a serious tone, asks everyone why they joined the Defense Force. He then proceeds to reveal he was once saved by Mina and has admired her ever since, much like the others. Kafka jumps in to share his own motives, revealing that he and Mina have been childhood friends. This revelation shocks the group, but their curiosity about her private life keeps them hooked. They force him to tell them everything about her. Later that night, Kafka reflects on Soshiro's warning about getting fired if he doesn't step up his game. Soshiro, having eavesdropped on his chat about Mina, approaches him about it. Kafka declares his resolve to fight alongside Mina, while Soshiro, in true rival fashion, asserts his determination to keep his own position. As night falls, a kaiju break report gets in, and Soshiro announces to the new intakes to get ready for their first mission. The kaiju emergent situation in Sagamihara apparently has started to escalate, to the extent that evacuations of the citizens are being seen through by military officials. Mina takes command of the defense force, and they collaborate with the military officers to ensure no casualties. She dismisses her forces into different groups, assigning them to different posts, like someone who has been playing 𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍 for a long time. As usual, the newbies are really nervous, but they try their best to maintain maximum composure. Kafka and Leno wish each other luck as they advance. Kikoru does the usual and steals the spotlight, eliminating the monsters easily and making it look like she's doing homework for a kindergartner. While they all fight, Iharu, who is as petty as Kendrick Lamar, can't help but feel competitive about the fact that Leno seems to be doing better than him in the fight. Thinking he's the main character, Kafka charges into battle with determination like Itadori Yuji, but gets his ass handed to him by one of the kaiju. Wait, I forgot he actually is. Kikoru then yells at the shitty old geezer for trying to be cool as she easily takes down the monsters around him. The evidence of their training is kicking in, and their teamwork seems to be on par with the students in Koro-sensei's class. Well, except for Jiji-san, who just sits in the corner and ruminates about how useless he is. What's bro even doing there in the first place? Shouldn't he be more bothered about raising grandkids by now? Kafka gets up suddenly and determines he's going to keep up with the rest of the squad like Sakura chasing Naruto and Sasuke's shadows. He gets a quick idea and decides to put his expertise to use. He heads to one of the kaiju corpses and bisects it to study the internal anatomy. After gaining a little intel, he puts a call through to Soshiro to share his updates. He tells him to announce to everybody to shoot the monsters from the side since that's where their cores are located. He then drops a bombshell that the particular species of kaiju they're dealing with has reproductive organs, and if they don't destroy the organs, they may end up spawning new kaiju, even after death. Soshiro thanks him for the solid information and proceeds to share it with the whole defense force. Like a foreigner seeing snow for the first time, Kafka seems really excited to have finally achieved something, but his celebration gets interrupted by an explosion from behind. He turns around and sees an Honju, one of the strongest categories of kaiju, attacking the defense force. Mina, from a distance, then channels up to 96% of her suit's power and fires a shot which leaves a hole, huge enough for Eren Yeager to take a nap, in its stomach. Kafka's jaw literally drops as she repeats the same process 3 more times and obliterates the Honju. Soshiro approaches Kafka, who is still starstruck, and tells him that's the power of the person he's trying to stand beside. He teases him again, saying an old geezer like him can't ever pull such a feat. Kafka asks him if he's also that powerful, and he tells him his unleashed combat power isn't as good as hers when it comes to long-ranged attacks and taking on big enemies. But when it comes to the average-sized ones, Mima doesn't stand a chance with him. To confirm his claim, a kaiju suddenly appears behind him and tries to attack, but he flinches his sword in a split second, and it gets sliced into multiple pieces in an instant. The kaiju is probably a paid actor. After the Honju dies, countless normal-sized kaiju spawn from its corpse and start running into the city, so the forces are dispersed to eliminate them before they do any damage. Leno and Iharu, who have been assigned to the same location, suddenly run into Kaiju number 9, the talking kaiju from the other day. Soshiro channels 92% attack power from his suit and tells Kafka, still in his kaiju form, that he'll be the one to end him. I've never seen someone or something freak out so much while maintaining maximum composure. Kafka is lost in thoughts about the fact that he doesn't want to end up killing his vice captain, but his chest gets slashed in a split second, so he realizes he's not going to survive if he considers holding back. Soshiro charges at him again and starts attacking at some Kizaru level speed. Kafka barely manages to evade his attacks, so he gets slashed a couple of times. The good news is he's a kaiju, so he also has regenerative abilities, although his stamina gets drained each time he uses it. Soshiro then gives him a cut so deep, his core gets visible for a split second. Kafka immediately regenerates and gains a little distance. Having located 𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿's core, Soshiro fires a massive attack from a distance, which only costs Kafka's leg while dodging. He then realizes in a split second that the attack was a decoy, since Soshiro has just inserted a sword in his spines from behind. In the conquest of survival, Kafka uses all his power to land a destructive punch, which Soshiro immediately retreats to avoid. When the dust settles, Soshiro realizes that Kaiju number 8 has escaped, so he reports it to Mina. Meanwhile, Kikoru worries about the fact that Soshiro had gone to hunt Kafka, and she recalls how he had saved her life in the past. While she buries herself in thoughts, Kafka suddenly appears in his human form. She gets really excited to see him alive, but her pride won't let her show it. Instead, she yells and scolds him like an African-American mother for being as reckless as Tanjiro in all his major fights. Shortly after, Mina asks Soshiro about the kaiju, and he tells her it is probably a daikaiju, one of the rarest kinds of kaiju. He tells her it didn't seem to be the type to attack people indiscriminately, and that it was fighting more like a human than a kaiju. Mina tells him to get some rest, and that she'll take care of it, no matter what type of kaiju it is. Ikaruga suddenly reports to them that the kaiju that attacked Leno and Iharu is the same one that appeared during their exam, and adds that it was said to be in human form when they found it. Leno wakes up in the hospital and sees Kafka and Kikoru sitting by him. He thanks Kafka for saving him, and Iharu, who happens to be on another bed in the same room, asks why he's thanking the old dude when it was clearly Kaiju no 8 that saved them. This time around, Kikoru cooks up lies to ward him off any suspicions. Later that evening, the Defense Force holds a banquet for the success of their mission. During the banquet, Soshiro announces that due to the useful information provided by Kafka during the mission, he's now being promoted from cadet to full officer, welcoming him to the 3rd Division. The geezer is moved to tears as he has finally moved a step closer to his dream of fighting alongside Mina like Power Rangers. The following day he gets inaugurated personally by Mina, who teases him that he's still far away from fighting by her side. Impressed that she still remembers their promise, Kafka gets carried away and addresses her by name again, which earns him some push-ups again. Leaving her room, he runs into Soshiro, who is training all alone, and finds out that he's not just doing any training, but is actually recreating his moves from his fight with him as a kaiju. This sends some chills down his spine. Meanwhile, that same night, some really eerie dragon-type kaiju are flying over the city with a Maharaga-looking beast on one of them's backs. Soshiro heads back to his office after his training, where he can't seem to get over the fact that Kaiju no 8 had felt strangely human while they were clashing, coupled with the report he got about Kaiju no 9, having the ability to speak and disguise in human form. He thinks to himself that something is definitely off. Meanwhile, Kafka, who had headed to the rooftop to get some air, proceeds to go in when he suddenly sees some dozen flaming rocks falling towards their base like meteorites. The rocks suddenly start crashing into the buildings within the Defense Force base, and it's almost like they had targeted the base specifically. Suddenly, it is discovered that each of the so-called rocks is actually kaiju, and not just any kind, but honju with high frequencies. The kaiju start destroying the buildings, and all the officers are forced to get prepared for the impromptu battle. Soshiro sees that they're only destroying the buildings within the base, so he concludes that they're after the base itself. While Soshiro assigns the officers responsibilities, he receives a call from Kafka, who is still on the rooftop, saying something is strange about the incident. Kafka informs him that Wyvern-type kaiju, like the ones that have just infiltrated their base, are only seen a few times each year, and that they are each as proud as 𝐒𝐔𝐁𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐍𝐿 in 7 deadly sins, so they always operate alone. He then hints that for them to swallow their pride and work together with intelligence to achieve a goal, it means there's definitely something with Sukuna-level powers controlling them. Shortly after, a Maharaga-looking beast shows up before Soshiro and asks him if he's the strongest human in the base. Soshiro is shocked about the fact that the beast can speak, but he replies that since the captain has gone for a meeting at HQ, he is the strongest. Suddenly the beast charges at him with a destructive punch, which he slightly evades. Judging from the destruction caused by a single punch, he deduces that it must also be a Daikaiju. He also notes that Saitama finally has a worthy rival. The beast makes a loud noise, and all the kaiju stop with the destruction and start working together to attack the defense force members. Kafka suddenly puts a call through to all his squad mates, telling them that the weak spot of that particular kaiju species is their backs, so they take his word and use some teamwork to try to attack one of them, but there's a plot twist. Another kaiju appears and seems to be guarding the back of the first like their homies. They try their best, but it's all futile. Not until Kikoru appears with a special weapon that had been granted to her for being the third strongest in the facility, and cuts through the kaiju like they're sandpaper. However, the beast is putting a lot of pressure on Soshiro, who is barely managing to block its attacks, and funny enough it seems to be enjoying the fight, smiling like 𝐒𝐔𝐁𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐏𝐍 clown before the Wano arc. Soshiro stylishly leads it to the training center in the base, where he can finally unleash his full power without worrying about hurting anyone. Leno also seems to have gotten a hang of it, so he takes on the kaiju alongside Mina, while Kafka assists with getting the wounded to safety. Suddenly, the senior officers who have been away arrive and shoulder most of the responsibilities of both kaiju slaying and attending to the wounded. Meanwhile, at the training center, Soshiro goes one for all, activating his 92% combat ability and slicing one of the beast's body parts off like it's Yamamoto. The beast just regenerates and then transforms into a bigger form, indicating more power like it's in the Power Rangers. The twist behind the dramatic transformation is that the vice captain isn't good at handling monsters that big, so he's pretty much toast. Regardless, Soshiro tries his best to take down the monster with his tremendous speed and combat abilities, but his swords can only do little damage to its tough exoskeleton. It's like trying to cut an orange with a plastic spoon. While he dances like a ballerina while trying to inflict major damage on the monster, his suit gives him a warning that he has exceeded 10 minutes since his maximum release, suggesting that he sets it down so as to not encounter side effects. Just like any other anime character, he ignores the warning and continues his ballet renditions. This time, he tries to pull a surprise attack, with the hopes of destroying the monster's core at its back. But when he attempts it, he gets surprised with a more strategized surprise attack, which sends him crashing into buildings, thereby knocking him out. While clinging to life, he gets a dramatic flashback about how his father had handed him a katana which had been passed down in their bloodline for 200 years, and how his father and everyone else had told him to give up on his dream about becoming a defense force member until he met Mina, who accepted him with open arms. Miraculously, he gets up with determination to do his best to protect the base until Mina returns, even if it kills him. He tries so hard and gets so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. Bro still gets his ass handed to him on a silver platter. Just when it seems like it's the end for him, Mina shows up and commends everybody for their hard work so far. She snipes the monster repeatedly from a distance, but it regenerates immediately after each shot. It's pretty much a hassle, but with help from Soshiro, who continuously keeps distracting the monster while slashing it up, she's able to locate its core, so she sends it to the world beyond. Immediately as the monster dies, they notice an ultra-massive kaiju bomb in the sky, which supposedly holds the same features as a nuclear bomb. The monster had planned, in case it died, to blow up the whole base. Evacuating isn't an option because, from the looks of things, the whole base will be in shambles before anyone even manages to make it to the gates. Without hesitating, Kafka suddenly charges at it, ignoring Leno's warnings, and transforms into his kaiju form openly, making everyone shocked. He goes Super Saiyan and leaps into the sky at tremendous speed, pushing the bomb as far as he can get before falling to the ground. The bomb explodes, and from that distance it still ends up destroying about half of the facilities in the base. Despite his heroic display, Kafka still gets taken into custody by the base he tries to protect. At the Defense Force headquarters, a topic is raised among the executives about the actions to take concerning the Daikaiju level kaiju found within the base, and Isao Shinomiya, the Director General of the Defense Force, concludes that they bring Kaiju number 8 in before deciding on what to do next. After being put in custody for a day, Kafka gets told HQ has requested to see him, so he's being taken there. He thinks to himself if he actually made the right decision back then, but convinces himself that he has no regrets, because if he hadn't done what he did, they'd all probably be red wallpapers of different sizes now. He gets handcuffed and escorted by a lot of guards like Roger when he's about to be killed. Getting outside, he sees all his squad members. He gets led to a bus which he meets Mina in. As they head off, she tells him she was also shocked to see him as a kaiju, but she is at the same time grateful because they couldn't have survived any other way. She tells him she's putting together a testimony about all the good deeds he has done, with the hopes that if they can prove that he's human, he might be pardoned. He asks her if he's still worthy enough to try to stand by her side, and she tells him he is. The 32-year-old geezer gets all emotional and weeps like a baby. The following day, back at the base, Leno and the rest of the squad seem worried, but all they can do is hope that HQ makes a fair decision. Soshiro, on the other hand, is angry about the fact that Kafka didn't use his full strength when fighting against him, so he wants him back for a rematch. Kikoru heads to the headquarters and tries to convince her father, the Director General, to release Kafka, but he shuns her, calling her a good-for-nothing. At the base, Mina announces to everyone that they'll be transferred to other divisions temporarily, since the last kaiju attack ended up destroying about 75% of the base's facilities. Back at the HQ facility, Kafka is held down like a cage in a rat. Wait, that doesn't sound right. Anyway, he is heavily guarded like Ukraine in a room when the Director General barges in and asks that his bindings be released. Kafka, thinking he has come to listen to him, tries to explain that he's human, but the General suddenly starts shooting at him, edging him to activate his kaiju hardening. All his explanations fall on deaf ears as the General changes into a suit that is amplified with the body parts of one of the strongest daikaiju they've ever come across. He chops off Kafka's arm instantly, so he has to transform into his full kaiju form to regenerate it. The General keeps on attacking non-stop, while Kafka tries his best to evade his attacks. Suddenly, Kafka cannot move. He looks down and discovers that his legs have been cut off, as the General charges at him with a super destructive punch. In a split second, a different personality takes over, and Kafka finds himself stuck in his mind. He's still bent on proving that he's human, but the thing controlling his body seems to have another intention.